Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about sourdough, my favorite topic, because that's kind of what I'm trying to learn how to do. I just got back from pickleball, and some of you who are new to my channel or aren't on my channel are wondering, why do I have a channel? And the reason is because this book is something I've kept my entire life, and they're recipes that when I work with other police officers or FBI agents, they would, back in the day, people would have potlucks and their wives or their girlfriends would make the best food that they could and would bring it to these potlucks. And then I would do my best to connive that person out of their recipe so I could make it my own family recipe. A little known fact to men, because women know this, is that women usually withhold their secrets in their recipe. They'll give you a basic recipe that will work, but they'll hold something back. And the reason is that they don't want you to accomplish what it took them years to accomplish. Kind of like if you play pickleball and you're a pro and you can analyze somebody else's game and realize that you can improve the person next to you game in a minute by looking at what they're doing, but you don't say a word. One, because you're not usually asked, but two, you don't want them to get as good as you. And I would say that I'm not like that at all. I will tell you the facts, like don't use tap water. I have two kinds of flours here. I'm gonna do a white variety today and a wheat. The flour that I'm using, this is King Arthur, and then this is called sourdough from Costco. It's like a 20-pound bag of wheat from the Middle East, and they probably don't have that horrible, what is it, glyphosate that they spray on all the crops that are killing us all dead, which is why all the white women have realized that don't buy anything off the shelves that's in a bag, because it has filled with preservatives and chemicals that are going to kill you. I think that African American women, Middle Eastern women, and other women of color have always known this, and sorry white ladies, we're just finally getting onto the bandwagon and learning that anything that lasts on a shelf for 30 days is going to kill you dead and you're going to get cancer. My husband did have cancer. He's in remission, and I try to be thoughtful of what I'm making for him so he can consume things in this house and know that they're going to be of benefit to him. And I know that any type of sugar in a bread is really bad for him. So thus me making sourdough bread. I did get this scale about 2 weeks ago, and it's called a KD 8000. I really like it a lot. Back when I was an FBI agent or a police officer, I would have thought that a scale in the kitchen meant that you were weighing out crack cocaine and you needed to go to jail, and that was probable cause. Nowadays, I would say you're just a very precise baker, or you mail things, with the postal service and save money by weighing your postage at home. I would say that in the past, this would have been what us investigators would have said, a clue. I learned after years of seizing assets that there's some money and drugs can be hidden anywhere, to ceiling tiles, washer and dryers, in the toilet tank, under the floor, under bird seed. There are millions of places for people to hide things. For some of you young investigators out there, I'll tell you, people used to be shocked because I would almost always quickly find whatever money or drugs they had in the house, so they couldn't figure it out. And part of the clue is that these bad guys always tend to have their stuff monitored. And I would look to see where they had their cameras set up in the house for security. That wasn't for burglars or their wives cheating on them. Those were usually focused on the door that they kept their dope or their money or their secret documents in. And and people be looking around the house and I go, oh, I just found like 40 kilos. And they would be like, how did you do that? And at that point in time, I didn't tell them because I like to be the person finding it. Before I departed, I told a lot of people my tricks of the trade. I still have some tricks that I haven't told. You know, a key on a key ring. If you look at somebody's keys, it will tell you what type of vehicles they own, what kind of safety deposit box and at what bank, and what kind of storage locker, because a lot of these people can't remember the codes to their storage lockers and they have them on their keys. Nowadays, everything that you want to know about yourself is on your GPS in your car or in your phone. Nothing is private. There's so many cameras in the world that nothing is private. If you wanted to avoid biometrics, you'd have to live inside for the rest of your life and only pay cash. So good luck with that, because every time you go to an ATM machine, that camera's on. So you're being monitored 24/7 every time you live and breathe outside, unless you're in nature far away from the city. So for all you people that don't like to get videotaped, you are being videotaped. Much of the traffic cameras now that used to only do license plate reading are good enough to do biometrics as you're going through that light. So the day of privacy, I think, much to my dismay, is long gone. So I guess you could just get over it. So back to the book that I was talking about. This is filled with secret recipes that I gained, and my daughter asked me, she said, can you put that in the will? Because I want to make sure that I get that, and it's mine. And I think that when I grew up, women who even worked or didn't work, their pride and their love was often showed in what they made in the kitchen, what they did as acts of love, the hours that they spent putting down the meal that they often didn't sit down for. As one of 12, as number 11, I can't remember a time in my life where I saw my mother sitting in my youth just to relax. She either had a bowl or a spoon or a broom or a vacuum in her hand every waking hour of her life. And it's interesting because some of my brothers and sisters don't realize how much our parents loved us. My father was a police officer, and he often worked 2 jobs to make sure that everything turned out and that we had enough to eat, because my mom didn't work. And I would say that their love were their acts of service. And I want my kids to know that I love you all the time, but when I spend an hour on lasagna, that's not for me, that's for you, because I love you. I would eat a bowl of cereal or with a cold lunch meat, piece of meat on some bread, and that would be fine, because I don't really care what I eat. But I know you care, and I know that you know that I love you, but I think that these live recipes, they're for you and for your children's children, and that's what this dialogue's about. So I'm going to get back to making this stuff. I need, okay, this is why we have recipe books. I did 4 times the recipe instead of 2 times the recipe. So since it's 1,000 grams of flour, it is 200 grams of starter. And I wanted you to look at the starter. This was way down here this morning. I have 4 jars that I took out. And you want to get the starter when it's doming. Doming means it's still bubbling up and it's still very active. So it is doming. If I hit it, it's not going down yet. And a lot of times the air will deflate. And this has a little bit of rye in it. So all of these are domed up and they're ready to go. I did them early this morning. You have to wake your starter up. If you put it in the refrigerator, you can't just knock on that door and pour the starter in. It's probably not gonna lift your dough up. So in the morning, I feed it, and when I come back from pickleball, it's doming, and that's right where I want it to be so I can make my first series of bread. So I'm gonna pause again and get my starter and my water together, which is spring water, and I'm gonna weigh them both on the scale, and then I'm gonna add them to the dough. I'm gonna put a well in the middle of this, because what we're gonna do is try to keep the salt on the outside edge away from the starter, because salt deactivates yeast. So if it's in the middle where all the nice starter is, it's kind of deflating it. So that's kind of baking chemistry at its lowest level, because that's what somebody told me, so I believe them. I could be wrong. So I'm gonna pause this, get my water ready and my starter, and pour it in for you. Okay, I have my 200 grams of starter in here. And if you look, this scale, if I take it off and put it to 0, it has the 200 grams plus the 60 grams of the plastic container. I can tear that scale down to 0. Adding my spring water, I need 748 grams of spring water. So you can watch it load in. That's a lot of water. It's up to 3, up to 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go, 752, not perfect, but close. So I have my water and my starter, and it's in big chunks. And you can see that that starter's ready. For all you people that think you could do sourdough in a week, it's not gonna happen unless you're borrowing somebody's starter. It takes almost 3 months to make a good starter. So if you're wondering why all your shit looks like bricks, it's because your starter's not ready. So go ask a friend for some, because they're getting rid of it every day, or you gotta wait and be patient and then try to make your bread. But it's not something you can say, I'm gonna make a sourdough loaf today, because it takes that long for the yeast to develop inside your jars, which everybody else is naming because they're like a pet. They have to feed them like every day. So see how those float around? And I want that mixed in well with my spring water, because I want it to get into the dough. And I don't want it to be all chunked up, because I don't want the flour to interact just with one portion of it. I put a well in the middle of my bowls. Let me show you that. To keep the salt out to the side. The salt is 24 grams of salt. I like this salt. I just got it from Safeway. It's nice. I think any fine sea salt works well. Regular salt probably works well too. I was just told to use sea salt, and because I try to listen when somebody teaches me something so I can improve on what I'm doing, so it doesn't end up being bad, I try to go with what's recommended. So now I have this milky, creamy water starter like that I'm gonna pour in the middle. Oh, there was some chunks in there. Oh, a lot of chunks in there. And I want to make sure all that starter gets in, so I'm going to dip the bowl in there. And I have a dough hook, but I'll use my hand because I like to feel the dough so I can feel the hydration. I don't have a good sense of if the flour is taking the liquid the way it should unless my hands actually get into it. So I'll start mixing with the dough hook. As you see, I kind of chop down and forward, and I start to develop those strands. But then at some point, it just gets really tedious. And some people will tell you, like, leave it shaggy. I don't. I do a lot of my mixing at the beginning. I think there's 1,000 different ways to do something right. You know, just like anything that you want to accomplish, different people have different ways to go about it. I'm going to get my hands wet so my hands don't stick in the dough. Okay, and now I'm gonna go all in with my hands and get this working. So back to our conversations about narcotics. I was for a period of time on a multiple of different drug squads, and if you ask my overall impression on what I accomplished, I think narcotics cause crime and robbery and addiction, but accomplishing big things in life, I would say that people are going to always use drugs. They're going to either use prescription opioids, or they're going to use marijuana. There are just people that are always going to find a source of drugs. Doesn't matter if they come in from the cartel or the Chinese with fentanyl, or Colombia or Venezuela or wherever they're coming in from, is that just like prohibition, people will always find a way to get their narcotics. And when I was younger, I used to think that I was doing something really important, stopping people from addiction, and I would just say somebody's always going to take their place. It's really education. When people have outlets to have good lives, that they're not looking to be addicts. And when you give people something to live for, you stop the causative source. And I don't think that we should be a lawless society, of course, but I think that looking back over my career, that general wellness of individuals, keeping people at a higher education level, does a lot more for the crime problem. You know, when you tell a child that has no resources, that have parents that aren't working, and they can make $500 a day on the street selling an 8-ball of dope, or you can work at McDonald's and make under minimum wage. Children that are hungry, that are faced with those choices, are gonna sell narcotics unless they have really great moral upbringing where, you know, they will struggle. I've been working since I was 11 years old. My mom and dad got me an underage work permit. I started out with a paper route at 11, and then by 14 I was working as a hostess at a Chinese restaurant collecting money under the table, and at 15 I worked as a cashier at Burger King and had an official W-2, and that's because my parents were really good people. My mom would go to church every single day, and my father would work really hard. And I think when you have parents that have very strong rules, but also are very thoughtful about how you feel and make you feel important and that you can do anything in your life as long as you try hard, that it goes pretty well. I said, I think, you know, the first thing you need to do in the United States is every school has a cafeteria. If these schools are in bad neighborhoods, in fact, all schools, they should offer breakfast, lunch, and dinner. SNAP benefits. I worked investigations on fraud with SNAP benefits. About 75% of all SNAP benefits have some sort of fraud, where people will exchange their benefits for cash so they can buy dough. Now, there are definitely people in need, people that have their house burnt down, they have parents that are critically ill, they're disabled, they have something critically wrong with them that they can't work. But every school system in America can take care of these children, so we care for our youth. It's amazing. Sometimes we act like a third world country. Now I'm on my soapbox. you know, you go to other countries where there's free health care and nobody wants to be sick and nobody wants to be hungry. So why wouldn't we make sure that these kids have safe places to go at dinner time? Like if their parents are involved in narcotics, why would we want them to go home to that environment? Have some after school programs. I mean, we're spending billions of dollars on problems that aren't ours, but we continue to raise a populace of uneducated American children because they just won't have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner program at the schools. It doesn't make any sense to me. How can you learn if you're starving? You know, I can say that legitimately, when my father died and I was 17, there were days that I would go with no food at all. And I just wouldn't tell anybody. And it would have been very nice to have not be noticed and just walk up to the cafeteria line and know that I'm gonna get my food that day. So, you know, I don't understand why we wouldn't want children to be fed. We have plenty of money in the United States. So, you know, I think that half of our narcotics problem has nothing to do with other than our children aren't becoming educated because they're starving. So if you really want to do something about how we're looked at by others in society and on this planet, that we should take care of our kids. That's a must. And we wouldn't have to have so many people employed in law enforcement if we took care of our children. I used to run a lot of wiretaps on people involved with the cartel. And I would hear the moms in the background with children crying from hunger and an addicted mother telling them, "Shut up, I'm not changing your diaper, get away from me." And I would sometimes be listening and have tears in my eyes thinking like, I want to go save that child, but I haven't got to the end of the investigation to know everybody that's involved. But in the meantime, I hear neglect and child abuse and horrific things because there's people in the world that once the addiction takes hold, they're barely human and they don't take care of their own. And that's an American problem. We don't have to have things that way. We don't have to have kids that choose a life of crime over education and becoming a doctor. You know, if we want our country to thrive, we have to make sure that people not only want to graduate high school, that they want to go on to get a PhD. I remember when I was living in Denmark, working for the FBI, I was talking to a woman while we were riding horses together, and she said, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you Americans." And you know, I was very boastful of my country. I had a lot of pride in the USA. And I said, "Why do you feel sorry for?" She goes, "Oh, only the rich are educated." And I said, "I paid for my own college." And she goes, "Well, you're one of the few." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, none of you have like master's degrees or PhDs because you can't make ends meet because you have to pay for your food." And in Denmark, we give a stipend to students so they can study and live and focus on their education. So, you know, the people in our country are all very highly educated because they can go on to learn as long as they want. And I was thinking of how hard it was. I definitely had 2 or 3 jobs the entire time I was a student, and my grades were very average because I was always thinking, do I have enough money for peanut butter and jelly, or puffed wheat cereal, or like I would have like $50 for the month for my groceries. And I typically worked in food service because of the people would throw out the sandwiches that were mismade, and I knew that I could get a meal. And I am grateful. If you look at my house, you're like, well, how did somebody in law enforcement afford that house? I will tell you that we're still paying our mortgage. I'm 62, and we have a mortgage. We were mortgage free when we lived in Virginia because we had a much smaller house. But my husband's still working. After I retired, I worked up until 2 years ago, and my husband continues on the daily grind, but we will probably sell this house and never pay off the mortgage because we'll move to something smaller and less substantial. But right now it's nice because he has a nice job and he continues to work, being 62, and take care of me when we both used to take care of each other, and I appreciate that. So now I'm going to show you what my dough looks like. So there's my dough. It's looking kind of lovely. All right, so my hands, the blob has taken effect. What I need to do now is I have a shower cap that I'll wet down and wring out the extra water, and I'm gonna let this sit till I do the first stretch and fold. So I'm gonna pause right here and get my hands cleaned up, and then I'll be back in a minute so I can teach you the rest of the stuff. Okay, so I got my shower cap on my first one, and I guess I should have used a bigger bowl for this because you dig it in, and I don't know if it can hold the capacity of this one because the wheat, I don't know what's going on, but it seems so much higher than it's supposed to be. So hopefully I didn't make a mistake. But I added my 748 grams of water and my 200 grams of starter, and I had 24 grams of salt and 1,000 of flour. This is a wheat batch. I think I'm gonna do a rosemary wheat, and then with the other sourdough, I think I'm gonna do a dessert loaf. I did a really lovely cocoa chocolate chip and espresso. So I used like a teaspoon and a half of espresso and probably a quarter cup of cocoa and then a bunch of chocolate chips. And I put that in a white, and holy cow, that was so good. It was to die for, and it was right early on, and I just thought like, I did notice that the cocoa absorbed a lot of the moisture, so I had to be careful with that, and it was just luck, honestly, like beginner's luck on that one that it turned out so nice, because I had no idea what the hydration should have been for the cocoa in that dough, but that is a lovely loaf of bread. If anybody's interested in bringing a dessert loaf for the holidays, you could braid it and make it look like a babka. So usually I tell a story, and since I'm digging through this dough, I'll tell you a story. I was in charge of a wiretap. We had an international cartel that we were trying to locate and arrest, and we were following this gentleman that we knew that was going to pick up like 40 kilos of cocaine, and we heard him on the phone saying that he was going to take off in about an hour to head down to Miami, and we're in Washington D.C. and we coordinated with the Miami FBI agents and told them we were likely following this guy down. We had our team of agents install a tracking device into the bad guy's vehicle so we could follow him. We had probably 15 agents that were going to take him from Washington D.C. all the way down to Miami. And we found out that he was scheduled to leave in like 2 hours. And so my boss, Kevin, was like, okay, You've got 30 minutes to get home, get everything you need. I don't know how long you're gonna be gone, but get it together. And so I take off home and I'm thinking, I'm gonna pack a bunch of underwear and food, like water and food for the road. Like, I don't care if I wear the same outfit 7 days in a row, I'm gonna eat and I'm not gonna be starving. So my girlfriend on my squad, who was amazing, she ended up being a leaguette in South America, spoke fluent Spanish. She's partnered up with me. I couldn't be happier because she's just a joy. Her name is Beth. And Beth, also married to an agent at this time, has very high intellect, and I couldn't be more pleased that she's going to be in my vehicle for this lengthy trip. And Beth has all sorts of stuff. She has books and pajamas and stuff like that. She's like, what did you bring? And I go, a cooler full of food? And she goes, you're kidding. And I go, no, like a bunch of underwear and food. And she started laughing. She goes, okay. So I said, I figure I can buy clothes when we're down there, when we get a break. So we start following this guy from Washington, and he's driving really fast, and we have to maintain a different distance so he doesn't spot us, and we have to shuffle cars back and forth behind him so he has no idea we're back there. That is the method of surveillance, so you never know. If surveillance is being done well on you, then you have no idea, because we're nowhere in your rearview mirror. We are following behind, we're trading up, we have different cars, different people, different disguises, and if you have somebody that knows anything about surveillance, they are not bumper locking you. If they are, they suck at it. And if you have some yeehaw that thinks that surveillance is tailing somebody off their back bumper with 3 feet between you, he is gonna get you shot. So tell him to back off and take his time. It's okay to catch up. So we're in the lead a couple different times, and about 6 hours goes by, and we could talk on the radio to each other, and we hear people saying, we're starving. And Beth and I are kind of laughing because we're eating like cheese and crackers with pepperoni, and we're having hors d'oeuvres and we're playing the radio, and Beth had a magnificent voice. She should have been a professional singer. So she would listen on the radio, and she'd start singing, and I sound like a dead frog that's being stepped on if I try to sing, so I just keep my mouth shut. I can't even articulate happy birthday. And Beth has this beautiful voice, and she's singing all the songs on the radio, and we're eating hors d'oeuvres, and we see these guys go by, and they're like, we're so hungry, and we're laughing. We're like, hey fellas, we've got food. So we're laughing at all the guys because, they pack their tactical gear and their weapons and their extra weapons. And when they were sent home, they brought what they thought. And I thought food was a good idea. So it gets to the point where we have to go to the bathroom because we've been eating. and I'm like, okay, well, we'll just find a drive-through. We'll run in and then we'll catch up to the group. And Beth is like, good idea. So we tell the group hey, let us know where you're at. Again, this is before you had navigation systems that helped you get where you're going. And this guy might have, a meeting with other cartel on the way down there for money or whatnot. We know he's got all the kilos in the bottom of his car, but that doesn't mean he's not going to meet up with some compadres on the way down there, and that's dangerous. We want to make sure everybody's safe. So we always want to outman and outweapon, whoever we're following. So Beth and I are like, we got to go bad, right? So we're not a guy, so we just can't pee out the window. That would be nice if we would have figured out to bring a porta potty into the car and a squatty potty, but at that point in time, these inventions for camping had not been invented, and we just had to stop at Burger King. So we run in and we dash in there to go to the bathroom, and we find out that we're 15 miles behind everybody. And Beth's like, what are we gonna do? And I go, well, we have a blue lights and siren and they're nowhere near here. So we fly. We're going at least 110 with blue lights and siren to catch up. And I'm like, shit, this is dangerous. And probably close to the fastest I've ever been in a car, except for when I was in a pursuit after an armed robber. But we are flying, and we catch up to the group, and about 3 hours later, this guy pulls into a motel, and we can hear from still have a wiretap up, that the people from the wiretap tell us that he's checked in, that he's not going anywhere, he's sleeping for the night. And so Beth and I are like, cool. So we get one room for the whole crew. There's probably like 15 of us. And we're going to take different rotations on this individual. And this was still in the day and age of chauvinism. And our team of gentlemen wanted to protect Beth and Bridget from the boogeyman, even though we had our own gun. And we both were really good shots. And I actually was a firearms instructor, so I didn't need any protection from anyone, but very thoughtful of the men trying to be men to protect the women, even though we didn't need your help. So we didn't get the late night rotation. We got the rotation in the morning, and things go without a hitch. No other bad guys show up. This guy's back on the road, and we follow him all the way down to Miami. We get down to Miami. We end up doing a search warrant on the house where we know that this is a stash house where the rest of the dope and money are. And we end up getting arrest warrants for him and getting, I didn't even know if we could count the amount of kilos that we got out of the house when we were there. And a lot of it was up in the ceiling tiles of this individual's residence. And I remember they wanted us to weigh it, in the Miami office, they wanted us to weigh the drugs on a bathroom scale. And I said, you're out of your mind. I said, we're accountable for every gram and hair in here. And I said, we're not gonna do it like that. And they're like, well, you know, in Miami, we weigh it the next day. And I said, that's not gonna happen. We're gonna all stay here till every piece of this is weighed. And the supervisor gets in my face that's in Miami, and he's not my boss, and he's trying to tell me like how we're gonna do it. And I'm like, nope, this is what the manual says, this is how we're gonna do it. And I end up ultimately having the big boss from my office get on the phone with him, and he acquiesces and lets us weigh every gram on a small scale and count all the money the way we're supposed to. And we get it all loaded up. And I kind of went back and told my boss, I said, hey, like, they told me that they don't weigh their stuff the next day, they just lock it up. My boss goes, well, that's not right. So he goes, write that up in a report. And I said, okay, but you know there's going to be grief over this later, because he was adamant about me not weighing it that evening. And my supervisor said, well, that's some shit. You know, do it the right way. You know, do a job big or small. Do it right or not at all. And that's Beth's saying, which I stole for the rest of my life. And so everything goes really well. Everybody's arrested. Our cartel gets arrested. The guy gets arrested. We recover money. We recover drugs. Successful mission. I don't think anything about it. 2 years later, it turns out that that supervisor with 7 other FBI agents, internal affairs, found out that they weren't doing what they were supposed to, and it was a big headline newspaper. And I thought back to myself, I wonder, after I wrote my report, if somebody from the OIG saw it and decided to investigate the Miami office. I never did find out, but I was grateful that my team of agents were honest and trustworthy and wonderful humans. And my experience with them, I would have given my life for any one of them, because that's how wonderful they were. And so, you know, these TV shows about the bad cops, there are some, but for the most part, there's people like me that grew up with parents that they want to do the right thing at the right time for the right reason, and they want to keep America safe and protect it from evil. So now that I've managed to get my dough into a big dough ball, that story's probably not as interesting, and the rest story's funny, but thanks for spending your day with me if you stayed through it, and that's what your dough should look like before you put the wet shower cap on it. That's easier than saran wrap all the time. I mean, you can use saran wrap, you can use a wet towel, but the shower cap just washes off. They're like $2, and you can rinse them off and reusable, and you're not killing the earth with all the plastic waste. And I don't know if you know this, you can consult any AI, that most humans have microplastics in their brain and in their blood. So when you can avoid that, do it, because we probably don't need plastic in our brain and in our blood. So stay healthy, make things in your own house so you know the ingredients, feed your family well, show them some love, make recipes that will last generations, and have a great day, because it is one. See y'all later. Gooey hand. See ya. Bye.